Blindside blocks are another area of the game where we're constantly using the philosophy and the rules together. Federation took the lead on this type of hit a few years back and greatly changed how blindside blocks could legally be thrown. Since that time, the NCAA and the NFL have done the same thing. So the old traditional blindside block that could knock people out the game in some instances is gone at all levels. And Federation has told us a way to make it legal, and our philosophy has helped with that. The rule gives us a basic definition. A blindside block is a block against an opponent who does not see the blocker approaching. That's a nice technical way of saying it's just a block you don't see coming. Blindside blocks can be legal, but they have to be executed properly. The rule here and the philosophy in Louisiana tells us what we need to determine whether a blindside block is legal or if it's a foul. If it's a foul because four things occurred. The first being that the player did not see the block coming with enough reasonable time to defend themselves. And that part's an important part of our philosophy. If you look at players who get blindside blocks, 9 out of 10 times at the last second, they're going to turn their head and see the blocker coming to them right at the last second. But the reality is that's not helping the situation. They need to be able to see the blocker coming with enough reasonable time to defend themselves. The fact that they just turn and see it at the last second isn't enough. The second part of determining whether it's a foul is if the block is initiated with open hands. If it's not initiated with open hands, that is probably a problem. The point behind that is that the force generated with open hands is not as severe as the force that's generated from a shoulder lead or a body block or a block where a player is throwing himself off the ground. The third thing for it to be a foul is that the block has to occur outside of the free blocking zone. That's important because Federation recognizes that blocking inside the free blocking zone will have a little more blindside blocks that are more traditional, and it can live with that. But remember, of course, the free blocking zone disintegrates as soon as the ball is out. The fourth thing for a blindside block to be a foul is if the block is forceful. Now, Federation doesn't tell us what forceful is, but you can use your common sense and you can just kind of take the word for what it means. It means something more than just a tap. It's getting to the point of the act is so forceful that it's more excessive than what is needed to push somebody off their pursuit. So if all these four things happen, the blindside block is a foul. What do we want to avoid? Exactly what you're seeing here. A player not knowing what's coming and getting an unnecessarily forceful hit. We want to avoid unnecessary injury, unnecessary force, and the game is trying to get rid of those unnecessary blocking techniques where less violent techniques can achieve the purpose of the blocker, which is simply to get a pursuer out of the way. It's also looking to get rid of unnecessary contact to an opponent whose focus is on something else at that point of the game. What are some indicators to look for? Well, if you see a player start crouching down and launching off the ground or thrusting upwards or leading with the shoulder, those are things that indicate problems. Those are also some indicators that suggest a player could target someone. So if you see that in the context of a blindside block, be looking for it because it indicates we might have trouble. So what do we want to see with legal blindside blocks? Well, we want to see the blocker do some good things. Two hands push, screening the opponent, taking a spot on the field, almost similar like a basketball player taking a charge and absorbing contact rather than initiating forceful contact himself. The blocker not running through an opponent is a good indicator that it's probably not a forceful, illegal blindside block. So let's take a look at some video and talk about this. For these videos involving blindside blocks, I want to kind of take a look at some actions that are considered legal. I think the rule's been around by now that we all have a pretty good idea of the illegal blindside blocks. Pretty much that player coming back against the grain, 21 players running one way and he's running the other. And he's going to launch, he's going to lead with his shoulder, he's going to crouch and just thrust upward and put his body through an opponent's body. Those are the hits that we're trying to get out the game. Those things, the former ESPN highlight hits, the big hits that could leave someone injured. I think we probably all have a good idea of what those are. But there are a lot of actions that are legal blindside blocks, and they just don't rise to the level of a foul. But if we don't talk about it, it's something you don't see often, and you're kind of left wondering. What we want to do is kind of look at that in these videos. So what we're going to do here first on this video is take a look at this play. Now, this is a broken play, and it's going to shift directions. And in that situation, when that happens, we always have to be aware of a blindside block. And it's actually going to be players from this side coming back over, throwing a block, and we want to take a look at that. So let's just watch the action here. Okay, as the quarterback will scramble, the formation's going to come, and now we're coming the other way. And there comes a hit by number 78, knocking 66 on the ground. So we're going to want to take a look at that action. So the first thing we want to think of when we see this, we know the formation's coming this way. As soon as now it turns back, we know there's a possibility. So we want to evaluate number 78's hit on number 66. So the first question is it a blindside block? Does 66 see it with enough reasonable opportunity to come? And the answer is no. This would be a blindside block. 66, his eyes are focused on here on the quarterback. This is where he's looking at right now. So he has really no focus on 78. So it is a blindside block. It's outside the free blocking zone because the blocking zone disintegrated a long time ago. Is it forceful? It has an element of force to it. But what the key is here is look at where the force comes from. We've got 78 reaching in. He's not going in with the shoulder. He's not leaving the ground. He's not going through the player. He's got position on him, and with two hands extends the arms. And that is where the force comes from. It's okay that it knocks him to the ground. There's nothing wrong with that. The whole idea is the force. And in this situation, we have an open hand, extended arm blocks that generates the entire force. This is a good example of a legal blindside block. You're going to see something like that similar in this play, although it won't be as pronounced and it'll be a little quicker, with number 7 coming back in. We'll take a look at the action again. As the run comes to the bottom of the screen, number 7 right here can see the player he's going to block. It would be really easy for him just to take this guy out. He could throw his shoulder into him, he could launch, he could do all kinds of things that would be illegal under the rule. Instead, in making his block, he simply takes a position, gets two arms, and pushes the player enough to throw him off his pursuit. That's the whole purpose of the block. Get the player away from the man with the ball. This accomplishes that, and it accomplishes it without throwing a shoulder, without throwing a body block, without going through the player and risking injury. Now, the player can continue to play in the play. He'll come back the next play, but the blocker has done exactly what he needed to do, throw the defense off his pursuit. Another perfect example of a legal blindside block. We'll take a look at this action here too, as this comes on a pass play to the left. You can see number 1 coming back in there and throwing a block. So let's evaluate it like we normally would. Is this block from the blind side? And the answer is yes. Number 15's focus is on the potential receiver. He doesn't see the blocker coming to him. So this is a block he doesn't come seeing. This is a blindside block. It's clearly outside of the free blocking zone. And there's a little force to it. You can see a little bit of shoulder in there. And while this comes close to the line, this really isn't so forceful enough that we would want a flag on this. Number one is really coming in and more just getting in the way, setting a pick. He clearly doesn't have to jump up and do what he's doing. He could just take there and stay more and absorb more of the contact. But this is not really a situation where one is putting his body through someone. This would be okay to not have a flag on this because there's really not enough force that's generated from this hit. This is not the kind of hit that really can put someone out the game. We're going to see another situation similar on this block, on this pass play coming back, or in this run play coming back. Right now that the quarterback is scrambling and running, we have one player on the team coming back against the grain. This is the person we want to see to be able to evaluate this. He's coming to take care and throw a block on this player whose focus is over here. So this contact, when made, is definitely a blindside block. And what we're going to see, instead of the offensive player coming back and going through the defensive player, all he really does is try to get in front of him by taking a position on the field and obstructing the defender's pursuit. There is contact. The offensive player is clearly bracing, clearly goes up a little and throws a bit of a block. But really, this is just taking a position on the field as opposed to going through someone. It's another good example of getting in the way, setting a pick or a screen, and it's a legal blindside block to that extent. So we do not need a foul on this. We're going to see something similar on this situation here as this play comes one way. Number 9 is coming back in to throw the block as it comes this way. So when he makes contact, this is from the blind side. The defender doesn't see the block coming. It's outside the neutral zone. It's not with two hands. But what we see, it's not really forceful going through. Instead, again, taking a position on the field and just kind of chipping the defender off his pursuit. This is perfectly acceptable. This is what we want. We don't have a player going through someone and putting someone unnecessarily in harm's way. This is another good example of a blindside block. You'll see another good example on this kickoff return as the return goes from one direction to the other. Again, change of directions on the field should bring our attention to a possible blindside block. And we see number 5 there make contact at about the 27-yard line. Obviously, there's no free blocking zone on a kickoff, so we don't have to worry about that. And this is not a block that is thrown with open hands. It is from the blind side because the player does not see it coming with enough time. There's a little bit of a shoulder push in there, but really, again, all 5 has done is taken a position on the field, obstructing the defender's path to the ball. He doesn't go through the player. He just sets up there, absorbs more of the contact, and disrupts the pursuit. Another good example of a perfectly legal blindside block. So again, when you see these type of hits, if the player is using open hands, if that's generating the force, if he's mostly just setting a pick on the field, if he's just screening a player out and trying to get in front without putting himself through the other player, those are probably going to be okay blocks. So remember the 4 things we want to see when you're running your analysis on these plays, and just keep looking at the video, keep looking at your own game, and just keep looking through this. As you see a block, work through that process to determine whether the foul is legal or not.